because all this debt has to be financed. They can be only be financed at this point by printing up more money. So yeah, you're right. And the largest element of the U.S. government's budget at this point is paying interest on the debt. So there's really no way out of it.
You're watching CapitalCosm. My name is Danny. It is July 7th, 2025, and my guest today is the legendary Doug Casey. Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend.
It's a pleasure to be here, although at the moment here is Uruguay, not the U.S.
Yeah. I mean, usually you come down stateside for the summers, but it looks like you're staying put on the southern hemisphere so far. So, nonetheless, happy to have you here virtually, Doug. Let's go ahead and dive into some key topics here. Lots of things going on around the world. I'll let you set the tempo here. What do you think should be on the radar screen for investors out there, given geopolitical risk, the big beautiful bill passing, the markets being what they are? What should be the main focus of the average investor out there?
Well, I look at what's cheap and what's dear in historical terms. And from that point of view, things have not changed much over the last year. The stock market is quite overpriced. The bond market is quite overpriced. And commodities are quite underpriced. So that's the general lay of the land. And what I'm doing with my money reflects that. As far as the commodities are concerned, though, I don't, well, I do, but not to a great degree, speculate in them using the futures market. I speculate in them indirectly through mining stocks. So it's a bit of a contradiction. On the one hand, I don't like stocks because they're overpriced, but wait a minute, mining stocks are a separate category and they're very, very cheap. In fact, mining stocks are about as cheap as they've ever been in history relative to almost everything else. And actually, you can't invest in mining stocks. Mining is a crappy 19th century choo-choo train business. It's a black hole for capital, generally speaking. So why would anybody specialize in resource stocks in general and mining stocks in particular? It's because they're very volatile. And if you get your timing right and you pick the right companies, it's possible to get 5 or 10 or 20 or more times on your money in just a short period of time. But once again, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. It's a crappy business, and most small mining companies or wannabe mining companies, because that's what most of them are, go bust and go to zero. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I'm doing.
Any particularities here in terms of mining stock? Are you referring to gold mining stocks, silver mining stocks? Any specificity there?
Well, most of the mining companies out there, the small ones, are gold oriented. So most of the things in my portfolio are gold. I'd say the second area that I go into a lot is uranium. I've long been a bull on uranium. The reason is nuclear power. I don't think there's any question that it's the safest, the cheapest, and the cleanest form of mass power generation. Uranium is about $75 a pound right now. And not so much in the US, but in China and India and the rest of the developing world. You can argue whether it's really developing or not. But they're building a lot of nuclear plants, and they'll need a lot of uranium to fuel those plants. So, big on gold, big on uranium. And of course, as the world electrifies, and that is a major trend, it's going to take a lot of copper. Uh, so, copper mines are interesting too. The problem with copper mines is that in order to be economic, they have to be gigantic. And that means that your somebody is going to have to invest not just millions, not just hundreds of millions, but billions of dollars to put a deposit into production. And it takes many years. So, playing in this area of the market, there are a lot of things to consider, not just economically, but geopolitically as well.
Right. And in regards to gold and silver here in particular, there appears to be this mass buying from institutions such as central banks across, the BRICS nations. Just recently, you had President Trump say that any affiliation or hostilities from quote unquote hostilities from these BRICS nations will be met with an additional 10% tariff. What are some of the ramifications of getting into another trade war with BRICS? Can Trump break BRICS by through economic warfare, trade warfare, et cetera?
Well, I've got to start out by saying that I'm quite disappointed in the way that the Trump regime has evolved. Um, when it came to choosing between Trump and uh, Kamala, there really was no choice because everything, I think, without exception, that the Kamala regime would have done would have been disastrous. I mean, philosophically, she's really was really a communist. So I guess the American public were right in choosing the lesser of two evils. Um, but what do I like and dislike about Trump, and how's that going to relate to the question you just asked? Uh, Good thing about Trump is he's anti-wokeism, with all that implies. Okay, that's wonderful. And he wants to deregulate, which will allow business to prosper. That's great. But, you know, he was very involved in Doge, uh, which is all about cutting taxes and firing excess employees, getting rid of waste and fraud in the government. But Elon Musk quit in disgust. And I think Doge is essentially a dead duck now that Musk is gone. Uh, and I'm afraid he's a he's an egomaniac. More than that, he's a megalomaniac. And he doesn't have any philosophical core, any philosophical center. He's an opportunist who will do anything that seems like a good idea at the time. So that uh, he likes he likes to stick his nose into everything, put his finger on everything. Uh, I'm afraid the Trump regime is going to end badly. I really do. It's going to wind up the big beautiful bill is really a tax and spend bill. It's Look, whenever you have 1,000 pages coming out of Congress, it's going to be basically about here are things that you must do, here are things that you cannot do, and here's how we're going to pay for all these new rules that we have. It abolishes very little, and instead it increases the share of government in the society, not decreases it. So I don't know if that answers the question
And
or
that's the
not.
trend. That's the trend, right, Doug? I mean, if you look at a chart of percent of government spending to GDP, it's just been going up and up and up. Government spending is contributing a larger share to GDP, which is masking the real GDP growth, right?
Yes, and it's a long-term trend. This is not something that's just been true over the last couple of decades or just since World War II. Uh, the government has been growing like a cancer very consistently since World War I. Certain times it's taken a big boost. World War One with Wilson and his programs, it grew a lot. Well, the initiation of the Federal Reserve and the income tax both happened in 1913. Then, of course, World War II and the Roosevelt uh, New Deal, immense expansion of the government. Same thing happened with Lyndon Johnson and his so-called Great Society in the Vietnam War, another expansion. And this trend has continued and accelerated so that at this point now, with the government running minimum $2 trillion per year deficits, and that's the minimum. It's probably going to go to 3, 4, $5 trillion per year in the near term. And where's that money going to come from? Well, taxes are quite high. Can they go higher? Eh, uh, the government's going to have to borrow that money. Okay, but where are they going to borrow it from?
Hmm.
The Chinese, the Japanese, other foreigners want to sell their treasury paper. They don't want to buy more and add to their risk, financing a manifestly bankrupt government. So where's the government going to get the money? Well, its $2 trillion deficits are mainly sold to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve buys the government's deficits and credits the government's accounts at commercial banks like Citibank or Wells Fargo or what have you, with Federal Reserve notes, with dollars. That increases the money supply, and that's the actual engine of inflation. So the answer to the question is inflation is inevitably going to go higher, a lot higher, unless we have a credit collapse, because there's so much debt in the world. At some point, people may not be able to pay it. They default, and then it's a daisy chain.
And
Uh,
you mentioned the $2 trillion annual deficit. You also have this $8 trillion coming due that's supposed to roll over sometime, I believe, in the next couple of months, actually, which was initially financed at near 0% interest rates. Now, if it were to roll over at the present rates, it would be rolled over from near 0% to 4.5, 5%, whatever the Fed funds rate is at the time of the rollover. How are they going to get? How are they going to find a way out of this? What's the Houdini escape trick to roll over that vast amount of debt with a much higher debt? You're looking for great deals on gold and silver, coins and bars from a company that you can trust, then you've got to check out the good folks over at Pimbex. This year, I've really gotten to know these guys, and all I can say is you're not going to deal with a better group of people. They're a family-owned gold and silver online bullion company offering the essentials and more at industry-leading prices while always providing first-class top-tier service. That's Pimbex.com. And if you're looking to convert some or all of your retirement account into real gold and silver, give Pimbex a call. They'll help explain the process and get you started on the right path. Your support at Pimbex also helps support the channel. So reach out to Pimbex today. You won't be disappointed. And make sure to tell them Danny sent you.
yeah,
Burden.
well, have they painted themselves into a corner at this point? You know, it's funny. It's been, people have been predicting with good reason since the 1960s that we were going to eventually get into a crisis from which there was no return. But we've not only survived for the last 60 years, but to all appearances, things have gotten better, at least in many ways. Um, However, I think that we really have reached the a point of no return uh, at this point, because the only way the government can get money is probably not from tax revenues, not from the borrowing of savings, but it's going to be printing money, like I said. And as far as the interest rates and the $8 trillion that you're talking about, Um, I believe that interest rates are going to go a lot higher in the future. Uh, it's funny. Interest rates have a long-term cycle. And you might recall during the early 1980s, even the US government was paying 14, 15, 16, up to 20% for
Hmm.
its money. Uh, that's going to happen again because the economy, in my opinion, is much less unstable and much, much more indebted than it was during the last real crisis of the early 1980s. So while the government's talking about should we raise low interest rates, lower interest rates, well, that's not something the government should do to start with. This is for the market to decide. Uh, and as you'll recall, I believe the Federal Reserve should be abolished. It serves no useful purpose. It's the engine of inflation, and it's a friend to the rich man and an enemy to the average Americans. But
And
the average American doesn't think about the Federal Reserve, actually.
no, not
But
at all. And
no,
isn't there a threshold? Like once interest rates reach some sufficiently high number, don't they become inflationary in a way? Because if you think about it, if the average Joe is able to secure a 10%, 15% risk-free rate of return, I mean, if everyone's earning 10%, 15% doing nothing, doesn't that, in a weird way, counterintuitively create inflation too?
sure, because all this debt has to be financed. It can be only be financed at this point by printing up more money. So yeah, you're right. Uh, and the largest element of the U.S. government's budget at this point is paying interest on the debt. Uh, so there's really no way out of it at this point that I can
Yeah,
see.
but if you and I could just sit here and just invest $100,000 and let it earn 15% interest, doing nothing, we're just getting $15,000 by sitting on our asses and doing nothing. I mean, isn't that by virtue inflation as well?
Well, it's a question of when you're getting a return, 10, 15%, if you can get that much, it's a question of how you get it. Uh, is it being generated by lending money to a productive business that's creating new goods and services? And uh, in that scenario, there's nothing wrong with debt. It's being allocated to produce more wealth. But that's not the case with government debt. Government debt isn't used to produce more wealth. It's it's the government. Listen, the government doesn't produce anything. If anything, it just stops production. So government debt is different from industrial debt because of what it's used at. It, the debt is being used to finance its past obligations, and they're all consumption type obligations. This debt is being used to finance Social Security, which is pure consumption, finance Medicaid, Medicare, which is pure consumption, uh, various welfare programs, pure consumption. Look, I've said for many years that the problem isn't whether the Republicans are in office or the Democrats are in office. The problem is the state itself as an institution. This is just what it does. The state is pure coercion. It's not a friendly big brother. Well, Big Brother wasn't too friendly in the Orwells. No, it's not a friendly Uncle Sam. Uh, it's an out of control monster. It's a predator. And the problem is that people don't look at it from a moral, from an ethical point of view. The state as an institution is pure coercion. It's not a good thing. And the real problem we have in the United States right now, well, all over the world, is that states have grown like a cancer. I mean, I talked about this trend having started about the beginning of the 20th century. And back then, the government, all levels of government, we're what, 5% of the economy. Now, all levels of government, we're probably talking 30, 35%, 40%. Who really knows? Because I don't trust the government's numbers much more than I trust the numbers of the Argentine government, frankly. They're all politically driven.
Now, here's an interesting point. You look at one of these Truth Social posts that Donald Trump gave out about a week ago. He said something along the lines of, and effectively conceding the budget cut route that initially campaigned on. He said something along the lines of, I'm a budget hawk, just like the rest of the GOP budget caucus or something like that. But
Well,
however,
that's a lie,
yeah,
but
yeah,
go ahead.
that's what he said. But he said that now is the time to go for growth. We have to grow our way out of the debt crisis that we found ourselves in. My question to you is there a way to sufficiently grow your way out of the debt crisis to outpace the Ponzi scheme here? Like it seems like they understand that the situation is hopeless and they're playing on tilt. I think you've used this analogy before. They're going all out on trying to grow the economy faster than the debt expands.
Yeah, they're really like a gambler that keeps doubling his bets, hoping to get out even. Because if they don't stop the current progression, the whole thing will collapse. The US government will have to declare bankruptcy, the currency will lose all value, and it will create chaos in the country. Um, is there any way out of this thing? Well, sure, there's a way out of it. The government could radically cut spending the way Doge was supposed to do. But it's not just a matter of cutting spending because when you cut government spending, when you prune it back, it's like a gardener pruning plants back. That's done so that they grow back bigger and stronger. You have to, these are weeds. You have to pull them out by the roots and sow Agent Orange where they grew. And that's not happening. Cutting back government agencies, okay, fine. It's great in the short run. But when the next administration comes in or when Trump changes his mind tomorrow morning, they'll expand, they'll grow. So uh, most of the agencies of the US government serve no useful purpose. Well, it's not just that. They're actively destructive and costly and bankrupting the country. And this is gonna end very badly. And yes, it can be changed, but you're going to have to get rid of the vast the vast majority of the government. It'd be wonderful if you get rid of all these cancerous government agencies instead of paying taxes of what depends on your tax bracket and things like that, but of 20, 30, 40% of your income. It would be nice if you paid no taxes. And this is possible if the cause for the taxes, which is the government, could be cut back enough. And then eventually that debt could be paid back. But, actually, uh, I'm all for not trying to pay the debt back because it's so large that it may be practically impossible. I think perhaps the best thing is that the US government defaults on its debt, but defaults on it honestly, not gradually, the way it's doing it now. Uh, because the people that own that government debt have basically been codependent with it, lending it money to do all the horrible things that it's been doing. So they should be punished. And a good reason to default on the debt is so that the next generation of American young people aren't saddled with immense taxes to pay it back. The real wealth in the world will still be here. It's just going to change ownership.
What
So
happens? What happens if they default on the debt?
a lot of institutions will go bankrupt. But like I said, the real wealth in the world will still exist. The buildings, the farms, the factories, the mines, the technology, that's not going to vanish. It's just that the debt, which is, like I said, owed to, well, some people are going to get hurt. A lot of banks will go bust. And if people have savings, they're going to lose that as the bank goes bust. Look, it's a problem. It's a question of whether you default on the bank now, quickly and honestly, calling it what it is, or whether you inflate the currency out of existence in order to service the debt, which is actually an even worse disaster.
Yeah. And that's what you saw in Weimar Republic. You saw the stock market make new all-time highs, but that was all masked by the inflation happening in the background. I want to, we mentioned Elon here. I want to tie it, this new development here from Elon, and that is this founding of a new third party called the American Party. Now, what's your take on this here, Doug? Does this have any legs to it? It seems like it was spawned out of Elon's disgust from the big beautiful bill, but someone more cynical would say that it's because his EV incentives may have been slashed as well. So what's your take on this new development here with regards to the American Party? It seems like they've got Rand Paul, Thomas Massey on board here, maybe a few others, we'll see. But how do you see this playing out?
Well, historically, as we all know, third parties don't really work in the US. And I guess the largest third party in existence right now is the Libertarian Party, uh, which sounds good on paper, but
Yeah,
is,
why wouldn't he just take that over instead of starting a new party?
well, I don't really know what Musk's philosophical beliefs really are. Are they libertarian? Of course, the problem with the Libertarian Party is that it's really not libertarian. It's
Mhm.
basically Um, it's basically a playpen for politically oriented people that can't make it in the real world of the Democrats and the Republicans. Uh, Actually, the Libertarian Party besmirches actual libertarian ideals, but it's the only third party we actually have in the US. Well, there's the Constitution Party, and there are a few others. There's actually a Communist Party in the US. I don't think it's going to work. Quite frankly, look, it's so hard to register your candidates in all 50 states and build the infrastructure. And what does the America Party represent? Uh, is it clear to you what he's saying it represents?
It sounds like one of the key components, at least, is fiscal responsibility, because I mean, that seems to have been the spawning, the catalyst for its creation, right? It's because of the big beautiful bill. So that for
Yeah,
sure
I
has to
guess
be
you.
one of the key points.
I don't know if fiscal responsibility on the part of the government means anything to the average American. What
Hmm.
the average American wants is free stuff. Uh, and the reason I say that, and I think that's a factual statement, is you may recall was it about 18 months ago that who's that fat guy that produces movies? Michael Moore,
Michael Moore, yeah.
right? He came up with 20 reasons why the average American is really a socialist at heart, like Michael himself is. And Matt Smith and I analyzed that. It seemed like an outrageous thing for him to say. 20 reasons why the average American is really a socialist at heart. And we looked at his propositions that he gave, what Americans believe, what they want, and what the numbers were, and all that. And he wasn't lying. I couldn't argue with anything that he said. Factually, he was correct. Uh, but it's basically all about wanting free stuff. It's like this guy that just won the Democratic primary in New York, which means you're the presumptive mayor of New York when the actual elections come. And he's an avowed and self-declared communist. You'd think that you'd think that you know people don't care about that. They don't care about the fact that he's a rather rabid follower of Muhammad the Prophet and the Palestinians. They don't care about that. What they care about, and the reason they voted for him, is because he's said numerous times he wants to punish the rich, take all that money away from those billionaires, which he doesn't think should exist, and offer free transportation and lots of government housing and government food stores, all kinds of cockamamie ideas. Okay. So that must be what the average American wants.
And it seems like with President Trump, for better or for worse, with him winning in 2024, it kind of gives him this hot potato to where he's the one that will, him and everything that he represents will be held accountable to what happens from that point on. So you fast forward to 2028, in much the same way that Bush created fertile grounds for Obama and Obama created fertile grounds for Trump. This could, in effect, create fertile grounds for a more radical person from the left to come in 2028.
Yeah, you're right. Because, Trump equates prosperity to low interest rates. So he's trying to influence the Federal Reserve to lower the rates that it makes available, the money that it makes available. He equates it to a high stock market. So he'd like to do everything he can to jam the stock market even higher, which means that both the stock market and the bond market are going to become more and more unstable. And I'm afraid that the economy could collapse, really collapse over the next few years. And Trump, because he's a chameleon, but because he's a rich guy, he's associated with capitalism. His his talk is all about capitalism and free markets, but it's not in reality. So that when something goes bad with the economy, which I think it will, people are going to react. The Democrats are going to come out and say, see, we were right. And they hate Trump anyway. In fact, we're actually on the ragged edge of a civil war. People are so pathologically aligned with being blue or red. So I'd say the chances of the Republicans staying in office in 2028 are slim, very slim.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I think this is he was in a way. I mean, anyone who would have inherited this economy and this kind of scenario was kind of destined to fail. And it's kind of a Hegelian dialectic, right? You create the reaction, you create the problem reaction, and then the final solution. So we'll see how things pan out here. Doug, thank you so much for your time here. I think we've covered pretty much everything that I had. I mean, that's pretty much all of the major headlines that we see on the radar screen right now. But if there's anything else that you want to talk about, I know you have the International Man newsletter, which I want to encourage my audience to indeed check out, and a number of other things you'd like to talk about too, including your YouTube channel and upcoming book. So the floor is yours.
Well, I just suggest that people go to internationalman.com, which is free and which is excellent. I do an article there every week, and all of our writers are just superb, including David Stockman, who is quite famous for his contributions to the Reagan regime many years ago. I have a podcast with Matt Smith a couple times a week called Doug Casey's Take on YouTube. And we have a series of novels that I'm doing with John Hunt, which are intended to reform the unjustly besmirched occupations of reputations of politically incorrect occupations.
Hmm.
Uh, our hero is a speculator, goes to Africa, gets involved in a bush war with boy soldiers, but makes a lot of money. Then he becomes a drug lord. We show how the FDA and the DEA regulated drug business works. Uh, After that, they put him in jail and he becomes an assassin. The next book is Terrorist. So he's just going from being a bad boy in one occupation to a even worse boy in and then it gets more radical from here. So those are on Amazon, and I think they're excellent reads. So I'd urge people to take a look at those. And we have a new book coming out called The Preparation, which talks about why a young man should not go to college, why it's worse than a misallocation of time and money, worse than a waste of time and money. It's actively destructive. And what exactly you should do with those 4 years instead to turn yourself into the kind of man that we all want to be. How you can turn yourself into a modern day Renaissance man, if you would, instead of wasting time and money going to college. So that's what I'm up to, generally speaking.
Yeah, we'll have a special link to the International Man down below, as well as links to the Amazon books, the books on Amazon that you just referenced here, Doug. I know you're a very renowned author in the libertarian space, so I want to encourage my audience to check out your books too. Link to all those books is down below in the description. Also, check out Doug Casey's Take. I'll have a YouTube link for that too. Be sure to subscribe. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Doug. Anything else you want to talk about? Any parting words before we wrap things up here?
I can't think of anything. It's going to be very, very interesting, and seeing what's going on in the next couple of years, it'll actually it seems like free entertainment. It's not free, but at least it's entertainment, and
Well,
that's
for
something
you
to
it is. You're
promote.
you're all the way out in Uruguay. Some of us we have to live the entertainment.
Yeah, that's right. I've long said I'd much rather watch this on my widescreen from a discrete location than watch it out my front window, which I hope things don't get too wild and woolly this summer in the US. But we'll see. It's unpredictable.
Yeah, the summer's just kicking in. And here's one more thing I noticed before we wrap up is that there seems to be this apathy in what used to be like this prepping community or prepping ethos out there. People have become more lackadaisical since President Trump's been in office, and they've kind of forgotten about preparing for the worst and looking for Plan B locations like you have. Is that still, should people still be on the lookout for a Plan B location outside of the
Yeah, they
U.S. and the
should.
Western world?
Yeah. People think it's morning in America, but I point out to them that morning only lasts 6 hours.
Hmm.
So the answer is yes.
All right. Well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, drop a like and comment. Go, Doug, go in the comment section. If you agreed with our takes here, if you disagreed with anything, let me know as well. I do, in fact, read the comments, but let me know what you disagreed on. Also, subscribe to the channel and do all the YouTube stuff that we just talked about. Every little bit helps in helping this video and this channel get boosted in the algorithm. So much appreciated there. And then finally, check us out on Substack. It's capitalcosm.substack.com to get early access, ad-free versions, and uncensored versions of all of my stuff, as well as the opportunity to ask questions to any of my feature guests, make topic recommendation, guest recommendations, and so much more. Link to my Capital Cosm is down below. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you later.